December 2015, I heard the words, "The cancer's growing, the chemo's not working, and there's nothing else we can do for you." And that was the same doctor who 1 year earlier, in December 2014, said, "It's stage 4, it's inoperable, you have a small chance of success." Now, in a 1 year period, I had 18 cycles of chemotherapy. I had a major operation to remove my colon, part of my stomach, and was given an ileostomy. I experienced some horrible side effects from the cancer treatment, including a blood clot in my lungs. And so when I heard there's nothing else we can do for you, I must have been the calmest person in the hospital that day, because I asked, so what can we do? And that actually turned out to have an amazing conversation about immunotherapy, because the doctor that day said I was a good candidate for it. And that's because of my Lynch syndrome diagnosis. Now, my dad died when I was a baby of bowel cancer, and that information at diagnosis meant that I was referred to the geneticist. It took about 8 months to get the confirmation of Lynch syndrome, but it was that confirmation that meant we were talking about immunotherapy, because the research was showing immunotherapy works really well with Lynch syndrome patients. The only problem being it's not on the NHS. So my oncologist said he would put in an application to the NHS for an individual funding request, but warned it may take a few months to hear back from them. So in the meantime, he was to refer me to the Sarah Cannon Research Institute with a view to get me onto a clinical trial. I asked how much it would cost privately, and he said I needed to be a millionaire. But nevertheless, 2016 began with hope. Terminal didn't quite mean terminal just yet. But 3 months later, hope was all but gone. The NHS came back and said no, they're not going to fund it. The trials that I wanted to go on were looking for first-line patients. With my previous chemotherapy, I was excluded from those. In desperation, we appealed to the drug companies for compassionate use, and they too said no. The drug is on the market. If you can pay for it, you can have access to it. One of my friends, he said, "Mo, let's fundraise. Let's do something. Even if we raise 5,000, we'll be doing something." Yet I was in no position to come out and beg for my life. Am I worthy? Am I deserving? And what is the price on life? Just some of the questions I'd go to bed pondering over. I'd wake up and I'd be rooted to my sofa, staring into the TV screen, not knowing what I was watching. I wouldn't shave, I wouldn't shower, didn't even change my clothes. I had extended family come to visit me. It felt as if I was dying. I was in no mood to see anyone or talk to anyone, and I cancelled appointments with so many people. Yet one Friday afternoon, I had a notification pop up. A pre-planned meeting with my friend Roberta, who was over from Brazil for a few days. And a voice inside said, "You can't cancel on Roberta. You may never see her again." And I listened to that voice, and I got up, had a shave, a shower, and a change. And I went to meet her. Now, in desperate times, you read those articles that are sent to you, apricot kernels and cannabis oil and alkaline diets, and in a desperate state, I was trying everything. But that day, the thought of another green juice just filled me with sickness. And so I said, fuck it. If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna enjoy my food. And with that, I ordered a piece of carrot cake. And we were having an amazing conversation, because Roberta and I, we go back to uni times, and her being in Brazil, very hardly see her. And then out of the blue, another friend, David, joined us. As far as I knew, David was in Dubai. He had been settled there for a number of years, but he joined us to make that moment happen. And it reminded me to reconnect with all the important things that day. And the next day, my personal trainer from previous times called me and invited me for lunch. And he got me pizza, which he would never have allowed me during the times I was training with him. And afterwards, he asked if I wanted to step into the gym. Because one of the saddest days was when I had to cancel my gym membership, and I'd not been there since. Yet that afternoon, I stepped in and the music was playing. It was Bastille's Pompeii, and they had a refit of the gym and people were working out, and all those good feelings of being in the gym just came back. And I said to Ali, I'm going to step on one of those treadmills one of these days. And the next day I got in touch with Rue and I met up with him and I said, let's fundraise. And we launched a £200,000 fundraising campaign, Keeping Hope. Keeping Hope for Mo is what we called it. And what happened next completely blew me away. The love and the kindness and the humanity, story after story. And I'll just share two today. One morning I got a message from someone in New Zealand. He said, "Hi Mo, my name's Alex, you don't know me. I'm a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend." Alex and Stephanie had heard my story through Facebook and they wanted to help. They decided to do a 50-day cycle trek from the south of New Zealand to the north, and in the process they raised £5,000. And they were complete strangers, helping. Like, I was just, why would you do that? But they're now friends. And closer to home, my local pharmacy were holding a connection for me on their counter. And one day I went in to pick up some medication where the pharmacist told me a homeless woman had stepped in for either painkillers or a tea or a coffee, I don't know. But she read my story, which was on the counter, put her hands in her pockets and left a few coins and said, "I want to be part of the campaign." Now my pharmacist said, "No, you keep those coins, I will put that in for you." But the woman said, "No, they have to be my coins. I want to be part of this campaign." And there I was, hearing this story, just completely humbled to the core, where someone I would have judged to have absolutely nothing gave absolutely everything for me. And we raised, in the first month, £60,000, which allowed me to begin treatment. Now the baseline scan, which took place the day before, with cancer you remember every single date, that's important. It was the 31st of May 2016. The baseline scan reported unequivocal progression. The lymph nodes continued to grow. The cancer was showing signs of spread into the liver and the spleen. And that was the projection. But my oncologist said, forget about this scan. Let's see what the immunotherapy does. Now the immunotherapy I had is called pembrolizumab. It took 30 minutes to infuse, and it was given to me every 3 weeks. Now, completely different from the chemotherapy, which took over 2 days. It was a pump that I'd be sent home with, and was given every 2 weeks. I had 4 cycles in a space of 12 weeks to have the first scan, and the results were incredible. One of the lymph nodes reduced by 70%. Another by 40%, and a couple more by 30%. It was in line with what the research suggested. Patients with Lynch syndrome responding really well to immunotherapy. I went on to have 16 cycles in a space of a year, and the scans showed continued response. Now my oncologist, he oversees a number of clinical trials. And in line with those, he said, let's stop your treatment and monitor. It's what they're doing with some of the new immunotherapy trials, where they're giving patients a year or 2 years and just seeing what happens. If it goes wrong, then they'll put them back on the drug. Initially, those scans were every 8 weeks, and then soon they turned to every 12 weeks. It's been the last scan was February this year, which was 21 months after stopping immunotherapy, and it showed continued stability with no cancer treatment. Now that is incredible, and it's amazing that this drug has been able to do that, and I'm blessed and lucky to have had that. Now, in terms of the side effects, now on the chemotherapy, it was sickness, it was diarrhea, it was fatigue, weight loss, tight mouth ulcers, like loss of taste. Those were the ones I experienced, and I know it's different for everybody. But with the immunotherapy, I initially had a boost in energy. I did go back to the gym and I did step on the treadmill again, and I began driving. But initially I had a lot of allergy, so my nose was blocked for over a year and I lost a sense of smell. Vitiligo patches all over my legs. But then when I stopped the immunotherapy, I developed joint pain. One knee, the second knee, my ankles, my hands, my shoulders. And it was classed as rheumatoid arthritis, which they gave me naproxen for. Now, after surgery, my poo collects into my stoma, and I've never had the urge to go to the toilet. Yet all of a sudden, I felt the sensation to go again. And I did, and I started passing mucousy type stuff, which kind of freaked me out. So I went to see my surgeon, and he said it's completely normal. The rectum that's remaining is still a living organism, and it's producing stuff all the time. But when that mucus turned to liquid, and then blood, like lots and lots of blood, it freaked me out. But my oncologist said, look, let's put a camera in and see what's happening. And that came back with a definitive ulcerative colitis diagnosis. Now, my oncologist says it's an immune response from the immunotherapy. So, the way I understand it, immunotherapy is made up of antibodies and antigens, which is designed to switch on the T cells. Now, we saw the presentation earlier of T cells and immune system, but what my understanding is, over time, those T cells fail to recognize those cancers, and the immunotherapy is designed to switch them back on to trigger the immune system to have that response. But what's happened is my immune system is overstimulated, and so all the side effects I've mentioned, the vitiligo, the allergy, the arthritis, the ulcerative colitis, all fall within this huge bracket of autoimmune related symptoms. Now, I saw a gastro consultant, and he said it's got nothing to do with the immunotherapy. It's either diversionary colitis or from all the naproxen I took. I saw a second gastro consultant. He said, I think you're predisposed to ulcerative colitis. It's got nothing to do with the immunotherapy or the surgery. So 3 doctors, 3 different opinions. So I don't know. The naproxen I actually had to stop taking because it didn't work for me anymore. The rheumatologist was about to inject me with a steroid, and I had alarm bells ringing. I'm like, hang on, I don't want this right now. Can I go and speak to my oncologist and come back? And they were perfectly happy with that. But my oncologist said, I don't want you to have those steroids unless you really need to, because we don't want to reverse the positive effects of the immunotherapy. And so I'm not having any treatment for ulcerative colitis or the arthritis at the moment. But I did ask my oncologist, so what can we do? Are there any food tests, allergy tests to see what triggers some of these? And he referred me to someone with an interest in microbiology. And we're now exploring the potential of having a fecal transplant, which is basically a poo transplant, taking healthy bacteria from somebody else's poo and inserting it into the rectum to see if that makes a difference. Now, I've not had it yet. We're just trying to get a kind of research study set up, and so maybe it's a conversation for a future conference. But I'm always reminded of the bigger picture, that the cancer is under control. It's stable. And I still take one day at a time. And it's also living from scan to scan, which I think a number of you in the audience can relate to. And I have to chase those scans. They're meant to happen every 3 months, but they end up happening every 4 months with a lot of emails and phone calls. But it's part and parcel, just get on with it. Now, I'm also continuously in touch with Bowel Cancer UK because I want my case study and my data to be involved in any NICE appraisal. Now, NICE stands for the National Institute for Care Excellence, and they're the ones who approve drugs for NHS use. And I actually attended a NICE appraisal for a different immunotherapy drug called nivolumab, and I absolutely gave it my all at that meeting, and we were confident it was going to pass. But this is all public information. The EMI had a number of, the European Medicines Agency had a number of questions for the company who couldn't answer them satisfactorily, so that particular appraisal was taken off NICE. It's been suspended for the time being, and they're going to resubmit when they're ready. But what I do understand, nivolumab are offering immunotherapy for patients with Lynch syndrome or MSI high cancers for third line. So third line is basically if you've had 1 line of chemo, 2 lines of chemo, and then the third line, nivolumab, are offering it as compassionate use, but that application needs to be made through an oncologist. Now, when I got diagnosed, it was shock after shock after shock, and you just get on with it. But what immunotherapy has allowed me to do is kind of take a breath and kind of go over everything that happened with hindsight. And I actually wrote a book which came out last year, and it's called Choosing to Stay, How Cancer Gave Me My Life Back. And it was very cathartic, that whole process of going over stuff that happened and knowing what had happened. And it was just an outpouring of emotion. Now, we have some books here. It's also available on Amazon. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions. So if there are any questions, the first person to ask can have this copy from me.
I'm not asking a question, but just to make the point that I think what you've experienced with the immunotherapy is quite common. People do get these kind of effects of letting the brakes off the immune system because these brakes are there to stop you getting these things. And all of us are set up differently to react to this kind of brakes taking off. So you may be a bit more likely than average to get ulcerative colitis, but up to now you haven't because everything else was on the okay side. Yeah, bit of rheumatoid, that kind of thing. Yeah, so everybody might be right, but it's the adding it all together that explains it. Yeah, see what I mean? And whether you get ulcerative colitis is probably a combination of how your immune system is set up in the first place, and which bugs live in your bowel. Yeah, because that's a little sort of bioreactor. Yeah, so it's highly likely that fits with it, and throwing the proxenatic will have another effect, and all this, that, and the other. The way the immunotherapy works is because maybe you noticed there was the PD1 and the PDL1. And PD1 is programmed death 1. So it's how lymphocytes kill abnormal things, right? But you don't want that to just go through you like a dose of salts and start giving you all sorts of stuff all over. So that's why the body keeps it under wraps, and it keeps those T cells in the fort, yeah, under orders. So if you give an antibody that blocks the PD1 linking to the PDL1, it allows that like I'm the cancer cell, and I got the throat on the lymphocyte, right, through PD1. If the antibody sticks to the end of that, I can't grab his throat, so he's able to come at me and get the necessary in. That's why it's such a powerful therapy. So your own body kills the cancer, just as our own bodies, as I tried to explain, are probably killing loads of cancers all the time, and it's just the occasional one that manages to get through the system. Yeah. So yeah, you're a absolutely cracking example of why this should be happening. And this is not for mentioning outside the room, okay? And I'm being serious. I have heard it said in the corridors of power, we really have to instigate this nice guidance on finding Lynch cancers, on finding people with Lynch, so that we can stop these really expensive cancers happening. And I never expected that driver at all. Yeah? This is from the highest corridors of power, right? So if that's a driver to finding people and preventing cancer, I could care less. The end justifies the means as far as I'm concerned, but they really ought to let people who are going to show probably a phenomenal response to have the stuff, yeah? Because hopefully you'll be paying tax for the rest of your life and it will pay it off. Yeah? No, I'm being serious. I'm being serious. That's not part of the nice guidance. It just looks at the cost to the NHS, as Tristan would agree, I'm sure, and the societal cost is not calculated in. Oh, there he is. There's a good man. So, yeah, this is a really important observation, and we see that in patients on immunotherapy for other things like kidney cancer and stuff, that some of them get side effects, others don't. It's a breeze, and if we could understand why, that would be a step forward. We would know the people to cover with some steroids and stuff, perhaps, during therapy.
Yeah, so I asked my oncologist about steroids because on Twitter I've seen guidance from Bartholomew's Hospital saying we give out steroids kind of like, one doctor said like candy to immunotherapy patients, and I asked what's the contradiction, and he said there is no contradiction. No. It's different for each. I'm what he classed as a watch and wait patient. Yes. So because I'm completely off it, he doesn't want to give me the steroids.
That's understandable.
So if I was on it, then maybe he would have.
We have an oncologist in Wales who treats kidney cancers, and he gives his patients a card because they turn up in your average district general hospital, and the doctors there just don't understand what's going on. And it says, if this patient gets this sort of side effects, hit them with a big dose of steroids, and let me know, and I'll come and hit them with a few more over the next 2 or 3 days, and it gets the immune system back into balance, and then those acute side effects are controlled. Then you get on with the rest of the therapy. So you don't need steroids for a long time, you just need an FD dose to get it back and get things into balance. So that's quite interesting.
Just on the point of the managing the side effects, because it's new, where doctors are used to managing chemotherapy side effects, but immunotherapy is quite new, and they've found that some GPs have been giving antibiotics, and you have this drug that's thousands of pounds being wiped out with drugs that cost like hundreds, and so I was
it does beg the question whether special patients or any patients who need particular care should have one of these sort of magic cards that you can send to people and say, you know, do not collect 200, do not pass go, do this with this patient, tell this specialist. Yeah, that's sort of a free get me through the what's it, and that is happening in other circumstances.
Any other questions?
Just a quick one.
Yep.
Non-technical. Non-technical. Probably everybody in here who's had cancer has had, will have, and does have meltdowns. How are you so chilled about it all? Because big respect to you. To listen to what you've been through and to be able to stand and speak with such confidence and lucidity, I've just nothing but respect for you.
Thank you. I mean, that's a really important question, because right from my diagnosis, I had support from an integrative physician who helped me with I was seeing him every week or every 2 weeks, and if I couldn't see him like physically over Skype or over a phone call, where I was going over my emotions and my fears, and that was a huge part of the whole process, like just sharing what my fears are and just letting them out in the open. Something, as I say, simple. When I went in for surgery, one of the fears was, what if I wake up in the middle of it? And the two anaesthetists were like, don't worry, there's going to be someone in the room monitoring that. And just that information, just like calm, and I didn't know that if I didn't ask. And so, and right now, even though I'm not on treatment, I see a therapist every so often, because like, so one of the topical conversations at the moment in terms of crime is knife crime. And it's on my doorstep where I live, like so many, and I'm becoming fearful. And it's one of those things I was talking to my therapist about, and we were just exploring that. Is it about preserving life? Because I've been, that I'm now susceptible to, I'm in danger and I'm looking out for self-preservation, whereas previously I could have fight or fled. Now I can't even run. And so, yeah, it's a great question, and I work on it all the time.
One little extra bit, if I may.
Yep.
I've just reminded myself. Interesting to hear that people try different diets. The WHO recognises that the biggest cause worldwide of immunosuppression is malnutrition and poor nutrition. Yeah? So I would just advise that you try to be as nourished as possible, because your lymphocytes need a lot of energy to do the job. So that's another way in which the cancers get one over on them, yeah, is to suppress their sugar supply. Yeah, that's an interesting little local sort of thing, yeah. So in the cancers, and it's probably part of the reason why cancer patients feel tired, because their cancers produce a lot of lactic acid, which is the same as running,
Okay.
yeah, and so the cancer is burning sugar very inefficiently. It would be smoking, the chimneys would be smoking, and your liver has to do a lot of work to put that lactate back into sugar. So it's like the equivalent of just running and running, just sitting there. Yeah, and it's a really interesting sort of phenomenon. So yeah, the aspect of trying to get enough nourishment into people to get their immune systems good, that might be telling us something as well. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Cool.
But great about the book.
Are there any other questions?
I'd like to ask a question actually about the work that you're doing with MES. Is it around to the encouragement of being able to use immunotherapy as a first-line treatment in Lynch syndrome patients? Rather
With
than,
NICE?
Yeah.
So the only involvement I have with them is through Bowel Cancer UK. They referred me as a patient expert for that particular appraisal, and I know someone's going to speak about NICE later on today. I'm hopeful there's going to be a pembrolizumab appraisal this year, and I think it's for first, because there's a first-line trial that's just closed, and the doctors who are running that are really pleased with from what I understand, pleased with the data, and I think that's going for appraisal this year. So if I get a chance to, I wasn't first line, but that's what I called for. At the nivolumab, I'm like, why do we even need it at third line?
Yeah.
The data's there,
Yeah.
if the DNA genetics match, and so that's what I advocate for.
Yeah, I just find that really interesting, because I'm a watch and wait patient in a different sort of sense, because it was decided not to put me through a chemotherapy after my surgery, because it just wouldn't be expensive. So obviously my interest would be for patients in the future, if the immunotherapy is, rather than having to have the 2 failed chemos first,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
when you know they're going to fail.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer to us, right?
Yeah, quite.
It's not a question, I just wanted to add on to what you were saying about the nivolumab having to wait the second line. So, because I did the same, so I had chemo, had no effect at all, and come back 3 months afterwards I stopped. So I went on Pembro, which I had to pay for, the same as you, crowdfund and all that. And then I just said to my oncologist, I just can't afford to keep doing this. So I kept pushing him, and he managed me to get on the second line for the nivolumab. So I guess what I'm saying is it is possible to get seen sooner, and just like don't believe if that's what they tell you, like you're going to have to wait. And maybe I was like, what's the point of me going on chemo again?
Yeah.
And so he kept pushing it, and he did manage to get me onto a trial.
Amazing.
For nivolumab, and now I'm on it. So I guess it's, yeah, just keep pushing for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Are we on?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to finish. I just want to say, like, I started off with sharing some of the bad news that I've had to hear throughout the past 4 and a bit years. But I don't know what the news is going to be in the future. But what I do know absolutely is whatever that news is, I'm going to carry on asking questions and doing my research and challenging the medical team when I don't feel something is right. And I would implore you all to ask questions, to do your research, and to challenge your teams if something doesn't feel right. And if you want to reach out, I'm in the patient group, and yeah, happy to have a chat whenever. Thank you.
Thank you.